You're dialed in to the antidote to globalist mainstream media, who would have you believe all is well. We're much more than a show. We're a movement, and we invite you to join us. This is Revelation Nation with Maxon and Platts. It's April 25th, 2023. You're viewing Revelation Nation with Maxon and Platts. I'm Mark Maxon.
And I'm Shiloh Platts.
Good to see you, Shiloh.
As always, it's great to see you, Mark.
Well, I got news for you yesterday that broke, my friend, but you've probably already seen it. It's just that many out there that are tuned in presently may not have, and I want to bring it to their attention. It looks like, Georgia is up to their shenanigans as well. Their Georgia prosecutor apparently said that they're going to reveal charging decisions in the Trump probe this summer.
You've got to be kidding me.
Oh, actually, come on. You're not surprised. I'm not surprised. I don't think any of us are surprised. They're going to be absolutely relentless in going after this man for one reason, not because he's committed a crime here, but because he stands between them and the free people of this nation, and that includes you and me.
And when you say them, Mark, maybe we ought to elaborate on that a little bit. It's this globalist cabal, the establishment, in other words.
Well, I'm gonna give some recommendations to our viewers today. And first off, let me invite you to get active. Let me invite you to participate if you're not already. We need to awaken. And don't confuse that with the woke movement. I think any of you that know me a lot better than that. I mean, the conscious, intelligent people of this country need to awaken to a reality. And that reality is we are under attack. This is a spiritual war. And I've talked to individual after individual, common man and woman, all the way to those that would be considered of significant stature in our society, whether it be politically, economically, that type of thing. They relate to what you're feeling. There's a problem, and the problem is coming from a handful of very powerful people that have existed for a long time. I'm going to cite a couple of quick things that are going to take us a little bit off path, but make sense in the big picture of what I'm going to share with you here today. And Shiloh has already forewarned me that he's going to step back a little bit and let me run with this for a little while, simply because he has interests that he needs to protect. And that is, if he were actually to express his full opinion under his First Amendment right, he could actually find himself under attack with regard to his livelihood. That's what we're facing in this country, and it shouldn't be that way. That's not the America that I grew up in.
And it will stay that way until we put a stop to it, until we say enough,
Absolutely.
And in large numbers say, look, this is not the America that we're going to live in anymore.
Shiloh, this is the most disturbing thing I've ever experienced in my lifetime. We all face personal challenges, and we face challenges in our enterprises, our place of employment, building a business, whatever it might be. We face challenges with government. There's always going to be opposition in life, but right now, this opposition's intention is to permanently take away the freedoms of the people, not just of this nation, but of the globe. And it is time for us to take a stand. It is time for all good people to say enough is enough. I'm not putting up with this anymore. And you have somebody that you can align yourself with, and together as a team, we can make the difference. So let me go back to just a little bit of history with you, if I may. Years ago on the air, I cited Woodrow Wilson, who was the president that signed off on the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. There are many out there who are listening to this right now that know that was not good for the future of this country. There are those that are not aware of that. I suggest you get educated in that area, because that is the entity, and the people behind that entity are the ones that are making your financial future. Or in other words, they're making the decisions that impact your financial future as well as your present, and for the last how many decades? Since 1913. Let's count that up. It's been 110 years, right? 110 years now. Wow, where does time go? But I wasn't here for that signing. I may look.
You weren't?
But no, I wasn't here for that signing. I came along a little bit after. But my grandfather was alive. As a matter of fact, he would have been 17 years of age, no, 18 years of age at the signing of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. This was a legislative act that was pushed through a skeleton Congress at the time, meaning it was actually signed, if my memory serves me absolutely correctly, December 23rd of 1913. Much of Congress had headed home for the holiday season or the Christmas season, New Year's season.
Now that wasn't by design, was it, Mark?
Oh no, not at all. Nothing ever just happens, you know. Yeah. I'm Shiloh, as anybody gets to know you and me, I think they're going to learn that we don't believe in coincidence.
No.
But with that said, Woodrow Wilson was very active. There was a man that had been invited over here by John Rockefeller, and he had been invited over here by this gentleman's name was Paul Warburg of the banking arena, and he was a very powerful man. Many say that in Annie, the series, the Broadway play Annie, if you remember Daddy Warbucks was modeled after Paul Warburg, and Warburg was a very powerful, influential man, and they wanted control ever since the Declaration of Independence. They wanted control of the U.S. economic system. And they knew the best way to control the people, even far above and beyond industrialization, was to control the money supply. So they had pushed and pushed and pushed for the longest time. This had been going on for many, many decades. And in 1913, after Warburg had been invited by Rockefeller in 1910 to come to the United States, visiting with industrial magnates, members of Congress, and Woodrow Wilson himself, president at the time, convinced this skeleton Congress to push through the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, which redirected control of the money from the Treasury Department to this consortium of banks. It's no more federal than Federal Express. It's only in the name, right? So in a nutshell, they finally had control of our money, and they were, for the first time, able to charge us interest on our own money. Talk about a coup d'etat. That's like the biggest con game that I think this nation has ever seen. So with that, Woodrow Wilson later would write of his regrets in supporting that legislative act and signing off on it. He also would speak of a society, and this is very important information. He published a book, and the book was basically his memoirs. And one of the things he had to say, and by the way, I've held an original copy because years ago I spoke about this on the air, and we had some incredible meetings back in 2007, the lead up to the financial crisis, because I saw it a year out that we were going to witness the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, when not Henry Hank Paulson, although he was involved in it, Ben Bernanke had been saying up till April of that year, and this is 2007, that we'd see some froth in the real estate market, maybe some reevaluation of values or adjustments of values up to 20% based regionally, but not as a nation. And when he was asked by CNN, God, did I say CNN? Back then I used to watch CNN from time to time. And he was queried, would we see as much as a 50% reduction in real estate values? And he said, no, not in his opinion, absolutely not. That it had never happened in American history before. He lied. And a man of his stature, of course, at that time, chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank, should have known better. Of course, we saw devaluation of real estate during the Great Depression of up to 50% around the country. Well, this very man that said it wasn't possible, just a few months later in August of that same year, 2007, would eliminate what were referred to as stated income, stated asset loans, or subprime lending. And of course, at that point, I knew there was an immediate problem because this country was dependent upon housing. Housing was the one thing we still manufacture here. We build it right here at home. It puts people to work, and that money just flows through the economy. Well, all of a sudden, they were cutting off 40% of the housing industry. Now, immediately, the Republicans in Congress attacked the Democrats because they said it was the Democrats that had been pushing opportunity for everybody to own a home. But that's not the truth. And of course, the Democrats would then criticize the Republicans, and that's how the game goes. Because, friends, it's a sleight of hand.
And then they all go out for cocktails afterwards.
There you go, or golfing together.
Yeah.
So, in a nutshell, Shiloh, you're absolutely correct. In a nutshell, what they want to do is keep us focused on the opposing party as the enemy, and there are factions of the opposing party that are the enemy,
and the Republican Party.
Yes, but as a whole, most Americans are more middle of the road. They're willing to negotiate. They're willing to approach things from a more moderate perspective. And then you get to the extremist level, and I've never seen anything this extreme in my lifetime. And
so extreme that they want to label us as the extremists.
There you go. That's a great example. And we'll get into that in future shows where I can give specific examples of how this media has just absolutely mastered creating the divide. And that's what they've been doing. See, united we stand, divided we fall. And that's the strategy they're playing with. They keep us focused on everything but the truth. But in reality, let me just share with you what Woodrow Wilson had to say. But this is after Ben Bernanke. I'll follow up with that right after Ben Bernanke. They cut off the money supply. I got on the air in August of that year, and I said, we're going to witness the greatest financial crisis in the history of the United States since the collapse of Wall Street in 29 and the following depression. I said that it would take 6 to 18 months. It took approximately 13. I didn't want to be right, but I knew I was right because we'd shipped all of our manufacturing, not across the border. And if we were going to ship it anywhere, that's where we should have shipped it, because we would have elevated our border nations and helped them become more self-reliant and profitable, which could only help us. And then we wouldn't have the masses pouring over into the United States. But keep this in mind. Industry, big industry loves cheap labor.
Yes.
And the one thing they love more than cheap labor is slave labor. And we are living in a world today where slavery is more prevalent. Most people probably aren't aware of this, but we can demonstrate it to you. We will prove it to you. Slavery today is more prevalent on our planet than at any point in time in history. And there's many precedents that we are now setting as a planet, and we need to reverse it, and we need to reverse it fast. But with that, of course, the rest is history. We know what happened. We just don't know why it happened. And that's something, Shiloh, I know you and I are going to have an opportunity to explain in the coming shows, because it's important people know this so that when they're challenged by their family members or somebody at the office, or their personal network, that they actually have the substance to say, hey, hold on for a second. Are you speaking from emotion? Or are you speaking from fact? Give me the facts. I want the facts. See, this is something I see about within extreme liberals. They cannot debate because there's no substance behind their argument other than emotion.
Well, that's why they censor so often.
And with that emotion comes irrationality.
Yes.
So let's go back to Woodrow Wilson for just a moment. Woodrow Wilson wrote, again in his memoirs, his regrets in playing a critical role in pushing through the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, because he knew the damage that he had done, or at least he had some idea as to what it was going to lead to. With that said, in this book, this original version that I held at this event to follow me having talked about it on the air, I had a listener show up with 100 plus people to attend this event and hear me speak. And that was pretty significant for our little station there in Salt Lake City at the time. With that, these were people that were really willing to say, I want to do something about this. I want to make change. Well, he shows up with a book. It was a family heirloom of Woodrow Wilson's book. It was first edition, mint condition, and he had it earmarked, well, piece of paper in there, and he turned directly to the page. I'm going to paraphrase Woodrow Wilson. He said, in my circles of world leaders, there is a group of men that is so powerful, so far reaching, so threatening, that we dare not speak of them above our breath.
Wow.
Yeah. 3 editions later, that was removed from the future publication
I wonder at whose
of his
behest.
book. Then came along a gentleman by the name of Dwight Eisenhower, who I might remind those was president. Well, I'll say this. He was president when I came into this world. And Dwight Eisenhower served as commander and not only commander in chief,
Supreme
but head
Allied
of the Allied
Commander.
Force.
Yeah.
What's that?
Supreme
Yes,
Allied Commander. Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, the highest ranking general in the United States military in World War II. And not only did he serve there, of course, we know that he went on to serve 2 terms as president of the United States. When Dwight Eisenhower left office, Dwight Eisenhower gave a farewell address as traditional for president. It's approximately 3.5, 4 minutes long, as my memory serves me. You can YouTube it, you can Google it, you can read
rumble it.
Yeah. Or you can, beautiful, good catch. You can listen to it for yourself, and you can see him actually deliver this speech. It's black and white, but it's there.
Probably
Anyway,
one of the most important speeches that a president has ever delivered. I know where you're
isn't
going.
that the truth? Would you like to share with our listeners what Dwight had to say in that farewell address?
He warned us of the military-industrial complex, and we've seen the consequences of not heeding that warning for generations now since he delivered that speech.
Well done. And in that, it was a healthy percentage of that few minutes that he spent with the American people after thanking the American people for his opportunity to serve his nation, that he spent the healthiest percentage addressing the threat of the military-industrial complex. And he did cite, by the way, that the war, World War II, had necessitated America moving from plows and tractors and farming equipment to moving to military machinery. And at this point in time, the reality was we couldn't go back. There was no way we could go back. It was we needed a strong military from that point forward. And he was right about that, but he also warned that there were interests within that military industrial complex that did not serve the American people, and in fact were the greatest threat to the future liberty of the American people. All I can say is, friends, watch it for yourself. Again, yes, you can get over, rumble it, YouTube it, research it, all right? With that said, then along came John Kennedy. And John Kennedy would give a press conference, and he would speak on what subject, Shiloh?
Secret societies.
Bingo.
So I've got an A+ so far.
Oh, bud, no, you're an A student across the board, but you're more than that, man. When it comes to this arena, you've got your doctorate, okay? I'll attest to that. With that said, he did. He spoke of secret societies and the dangers they posed, and that he was going to get rid of them, that was his objective. We also know that he wanted to bust the CIA into 1,000 pieces. So here we have a president going back 110 years ago, talking about a group of men so powerful that none dare speak of their existence above their breath. I think we all can pretty much figure out what Wilson was implying, right?
Yes.
And then comes along Eisenhower, and then comes along Kennedy. We have a pattern here, and it's not coincidental. By the way, Truman would eventually acknowledge his regrets in giving the former intelligence agencies of the U.S. military during World War II authorization to move forward and orchestrate and develop what is today the CIA. Then you want to start looking at the CIA's connections here in the United States to various administrations and presidents that have served since its invention.
Yes, you'll see a pattern there as well.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go back to an interview I had with Jesse Ventura just briefly when he was elected governor of the great state of Minnesota. And Jesse told me the story of within a couple of weeks of being in office, he had a state representative, not a representative elected official as I remember it. It was somebody working in capacity of appointment for the state of Minnesota that came into the office to meet with him, introducing him to another individual in a similar capacity, and then ultimately revealing that that individual was actually a CIA operative. And Ventura asked the question, dear God, this is Minnesota. If the CIA is unconstitutionally operating internally within the United States, within the state of Minnesota, where are they not? They're everywhere. Then we can go back one more step, and I'm going to leave it at that today before I move to the other subject that I really wanted to focus on. He then went on to basically, well, no, I'm going to go on to basically cite that many of you remember Woodward and Bernstein. And Shallow, I certainly know you are very well aware of their history with Watergate, et cetera. They were the journalists that broke open the Watergate story, which ultimately would take down Richard Nixon.
Who was railroaded, I might
now,
add. Tucker Carlson
yes,
just recently exposed the CIA's involvement in railroading Richard Nixon.
And when Tucker broadcast that show, I think I just mentioned it in our previous show, when Tucker actually aired that, I knew that was the line. Tucker had crossed the line that was going to lead to the end of his career with Fox.
What you referenced in the last episode was actually when he revealed the CIA's involvement in the Kennedy assassination. We didn't even mention yet that he also revealed Richard Nixon being railroaded by the CIA.
Absolutely, absolutely. Richard Nixon was an outsider, even though Richard Nixon basically acquiesced to the will in a number of areas. Richard had served his time for them if he was ever an insider. And I don't think he was.
I don't either.
I think that Richard did what he thought he needed to do with regard to taking us off the gold and silver standard, quite simply because by the time we'd gotten to the early 1970s, the dollar was taking a beating. And there are countries in Europe that were coming in, such as France, and demanding their gold. They wanted their gold. And literally, as history shows it, France sent a warship to New York's harbor as a statement saying, we want our gold, send us our gold home. And we couldn't do it. So we removed ourselves, in essence, from the gold standard and went to fiat currency, which was a great downfall for our country. And we're paying a severe price for it. We have paid a severe price for it ever since. It's affected every one of you financially. Many of you already understand that. If you don't, in the coming episodes, we will demonstrate to you what has happened to America and to the American family as a result of these horrific policies, which have enriched a handful of people beyond comprehension, while the rest have had to endure great hardships in many instances across this nation. But anyway, there's the basic foundation to what will lead into some of our future stories. But this is something that I wanted to get across. These same members of the cabal, and we can talk about various groups, but I'm going to address the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab. There's another name that you should be following, you should be paying close attention to.
Very
and
close.
Let me give a few books. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I said very close. You should be paying very close attention to Klaus Schwab.
Very much so.
He's a villain.
And so let's take into account just a few people. We hear a lot about Soros, another villain, but much bigger and much more threatening than Soros.
It's Klaus Schwab.
Is yes, in the World Economic Forum.
Yes.
But let's go down and there's a lot of other names and that we can throw out over time that many will relate to. But let's just do this just for a brief second so we can understand the big picture on this. As a result, these people control the money of our society, and that violated the constitutional structure of our country. The men that founded this country understood the old adage, he who holds the gold
makes the rules.
Exactly. And they, of course, fled the tyranny of the king and set up a government, basically, as we take a look at it, the executive, the judicial, and the legislative branch to balance each other. But in that, they gave Congress, that legislative branch, control of the monetary system via the U.S. Treasury Department. And there's just so much detail to the story that's absolutely fascinating for the inquiring mind. But a lot of people aren't bothered with it, to their misfortune and to the misfortune of the nation. But of course, it's not emphasized in our education system. And what blows my mind is I think the most important education any citizen coming into a country can have is to understand how their monetary system works.
Yeah.
And how business is conducted. But anyway, so I'm going to bring it back around just for the time being, if you will accept, and we will prove this out, that there are a handful of people globally that basically are controlling your future in every way. The people that you elect, the people that manage your money, the people that create policy. Not to get off on a tangent, but one of the greatest misservices or disservices, excuse me, that our Supreme Court has ever committed was in the last 2 decades when they allowed super fund PACs, so super PACs, to collect vast amounts of money without disclosing where that money was coming from. I understood their intentions, but in the big picture, they did a disservice because now these super PACs can gather a massive amounts of money from foreign governments.
Billions.
Yeah, and these can be communist governments such as the CCP, and then they can run ads to support specific candidates that will support their interests financially on a national and global perspective. We're seeing anyway. So let's come back around to a story that I read, actually viewed. Let me correct that, Shiloh. I just came back, as you know, from the Utah convention, state GOP convention. Last spring, it was the convention which determined the candidates that were going to be going forward on the ballot for the people to vote. This, however, was an internal convention which had to do with us appointing secretary, treasurer to the party, etc. And we got up there, and it was interesting to note that Governor Cox from the state of Utah did appear for a few minutes at this convention. Mitt Romney, again, like last year's convention, failed to show.
I wonder why.
Everybody there knew why. He would have been booed.
Yeah.
Right out of the largest
yes.
The largest convention in the state of Utah, mind you, and he would have been booed out of there. So he failed to show. With that stated, we had the pleasure of Ron DeSantis coming to speak. And Shiloh, you and I are going to go about doing everything we can to get our hands on what's approximately a 40-minute speech that he delivered to the attendees of that convention. He received countless standing ovations. It was deafening inside that basketball auditorium at UVU, and rightfully, because bullet point by bullet point by bullet point, he addressed the enemy and what they've been striving to impose upon the people of Florida, and how he and the Florida legislature overcame the enemy and came away in his second term election, swinging the tide of public opinion to such a degree that he went from winning by a previous 37,000 and change votes, over 8 million votes cast, to, I believe it was 1.5 million.
And 20%. Yes, he won with a 20% margin.
By being bold and being truthful and not being concerned about his reelection and how it was going to sway the public opinion from what was a narrow margin of separation between liberal thinking and conservative thinking, he stood firm and he fought back.
He stood on
under
principle.
Great attack. Yes, just like President Trump.
Absolutely.
He was attacked relentlessly like President Trump.
Yes.
Mind you that in that election, an overwhelming swing. As a matter of fact, there were 32 school board presentations that were up for grabs in this last election in the state of Florida. They won. The conservatives won 29 of those 32 posts. That is a victory. And that sends a message to the world that you're really not going to hear in the mainstream media, because they don't want you to comprehend how powerful you are, how powerful it is to stand on principle, how powerful it is to stand with conviction, how powerful it is to stand when you know you're right and not relinquish yourself or your integrity to the adversary. God bless that man. It was motivational. It was inspirational. And I'm telling you that those attendees were moved like nothing else. And after he spoke, it was actually humorous to watch Utah's governor step up there for 5 minutes and tried to hold his own and point out to those in attendance that they had gotten 4 different things done of significance through the state of Utah over this last term. It was actually disappointing, discouraging, but it was humorous. With that said, let me come back around to a subject. And keep in mind, I'd been operating when I was attending the day before yesterday. I'd been operating on 3 hours sleep. I had a lot to do here in Southern Utah. I got on the road, got up there. It was about 11:15 when I checked into the hotel. About midnight, I was ready to call it a night because I knew I needed to be up at 6:15 to be there on a timely basis. With that said, I was having some trouble sleeping. It might have been the coffee that I drank on the way in. But with that, I think it was also, there was a lot on my mind. And I made the mistake of going through some social media and some emails and catching up with some business as I lied there in bed. And I ran across a story, Shiloh. And I could not help but watch it. And for all of you listening today, if you're already a member of Americans for Truth and Accountability, we invite you to come join us. We're looking for like-minded people in this particular organization, so that you know you're not alone, so that you can express yourself without being attacked.
It's a private Facebook group. I want to qualify what you just said. People who are afraid of being attacked for espousing their genuine, authentic points of view. Revelation Nation is a public Facebook page. And yes, we encourage you. In fact, we would love for you to like and share that page. But if you feel like you're better served under the umbrella of anonymity, or I should say privacy, the Americans for Truth and Accountability is a Facebook page that you can join and share your thoughts, read our posts, see our comments with the comfort of knowing that it's not a publicly accessible group. But
exactly. And on Revelation Nation, we invite debate.
Absolutely.
We encourage debate. We're in no way, shape, or form afraid of debate. It is those whose arguments are empty, that have no substance or factual evidence behind them, that are afraid of debate.
And they're usually quick to anger and insult. I've noticed that.
Yes, and the reason we wanted to provide Americans for Truth and Accountability, and I think you stated that well, is there are people out there whose jobs may be at risk because they share their views in today's society. And until we can overcome that and make it unlawful in this country to fire somebody because they have spoken their opinion publicly, we're going to keep that format in place. I look forward to the day that we don't need that private group anymore.
Amen.
And we're going to get there, aren't we?
We're going to work like hell to do exactly that.
I love it. All right. So with this note, I had viewed the story. And let me tell you, if I was having trouble getting to sleep before, it was not good. It was about transsexuals. Now they're transvestites, which are just what? They're men that like to dress like women. Am I correct?
That's the way I understand it.
Right. But a transsexual is an individual that goes so far as to identify with the opposite sex and profess to be the opposite sex, and will go so far as to be placed or allow themselves to be placed on hormone treatment to begin to change their body's natural hormonal hormonal production and may go so far as to actually have surgery. Now, let me mind you, we were all shocked by Bruce Jenner, or at least a healthy percentage of this country was at one time. But, I've come to like Caitlyn Jenner on many levels. I don't agree with Caitlyn's decision. And because Caitlyn has been relatively respectful and not forced this upon our society, from my personal experience, I may stand to be corrected on this note at some point in time. I will respect Caitlyn. I actually was thrilled to see Caitlyn run in the state of California recently because Caitlyn was challenging the school system, forcing this upon the children, as I recall, as I interpreted it. But, is it a lifestyle that I understand? No. But do I have to understand everything to be accepting of others? No. What I don't tolerate is somebody that has a separate point of view that wants to force it on my children and grandchildren. That's not acceptable. When they want to take a public school system and indoctrinate children and then take the rights away from parents in the supervision of those children and determining the future identity of these children, it is absolutely, completely unacceptable, inexcusable, and must be met with the greatest force of resistance known to humanity. You may understand why I feel so strongly in this. This was actually on YouTube, and I was quite surprised that this gentleman was able to cite this story on YouTube and that it was still up. And by the way, it is posted on Americans for Truth and Accountability. You can request to become a member, you're accepted, you can scroll through and look at a lot of valuable information that we post there. And we invite you to comment, we invite you to post valuable information. With that said, this gentleman told the story of a 4-year-old boy. Now, this 4-year-old boy was struggling in some ways with maybe his sexual identity as a boy, as a male. And perhaps he enjoyed playing with dolls and dressing up like a little girl. It could have been a number of different things. But this mother was just gung-ho, almost to the point that my impression was the mother had wanted a girl and got a boy, but there's a solution to that. We'll just change you. In her mind, and the way she presented herself was, I was seeing the feminine attributes of my boy, and I wanted to support my boy in being able to express himself in a feminine or female identity. That's the way she presents it. So in a nutshell, she pursued medical support and eventually placed this boy on female hormones, and then eventually supported the boy in a full-blown sex change surgical procedure or multiple procedures.
And how old was he?
Well, this started at 4 years of age and it progressed. I believe this boy, I'm going to call him a boy, okay, that now professes to be a girl, is at least 18 years of age at this stage. Now, it appears to me from this video, Shiloh, when you get a chance, I really encourage you to watch it. It's very, it's disturbing. Let me share with everybody, it is disturbing. And you may not feel that I can do this. It's just this is horrible to do this to a child. You may have an opposing view. You may think, well, you know what? I'm with the mother. But I just got to cite this for just a moment. Does a 4-year-old have the capacity to determine its God-given sex was not right? What if that child had been supported as a male with a fatherly image? Maybe that child would have chosen a completely different direction or found that, no, I don't identify as a female. Anyway, my point is, at an early age, the decision was made for the child. Now, Andy Griffith had a show, Mayberry RFD. There are going to be a few of you out there old enough to remember that. And Shiloh, if you watched anything, it was reruns.
Yeah, it was reruns. Yeah, like MASH and all the other shows that I'm familiar with that were before my time.
There was an individual speaking to Sheriff Taylor that said that he should let Opie make his own decisions as a boy. That would allow him, I think, in essence, to become a man. And Sheriff Taylor responded. He says, "That's not how I roll. You see, as I see it, a child, well, child can be presented a flashy object. It's attractive, it's alluring. And by the time they grab for it, it's too late. They're pulled in. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to protect him until he's old enough to make the right decisions." Now, I'm paraphrasing the sheriff, but I thought those were some powerful words. That's why we're placed here as parents. That's the chain of evolution for us, is to protect our offspring and to
The
nurture
most
them.
vulnerable among us.
Exactly. So as I see it, I came away from, let me describe this because it is very disturbing. And I want you to know if you're strong enough, and I hope you are, because we need to be strong. We need to be strong for the future of our children. We need to be strong for their future and the future of this nation. They fillet the penis and they tuck it up inside to create an artificial vagina. And this takes a number of procedures over the course of time. And as the mother was describing, as this child is getting ready to go off to Harvard, that she's going to beat that child over the head if that child does not keep what is like a probe-like device or insert up in the synthetic vagina. Because if this child does not do that, or now adult does not do that, it will heal, because that's what the body does. The body's designed to heal the scars and try to take itself back, or take its condition back to its original condition, right? And as she described all of this, and they also interviewed the surgeon, or at least one of the surgeons involved with this process, the attending doctors. These are people that placed the child on hormone, that actually castrated the child, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought to myself, hold on for a second. I find myself, and you do too, living in a world today, a nation today, that finds it acceptable to mutilate a child based upon an opinion. I thought to myself, this is the worst form of child abuse that can exist, aside from actually taking the life of that child. There's a woman right now on trial in Idaho for killing her 2 children, or having them killed. And I thought to myself, is this not as bad? Maybe even worse. There's no going back for this child. And the child was made long before, the decision was made long before being an adult. You know what, friends? You can't smoke in this country, in the majority of this country, as I know it, before you're 21 lawfully. You can't drink before you're 21 lawfully in the healthiest portion of this country, or multiple, the majority of states. But you can make a decision that you identify as an opposite sex to the sex that you were born, that God gave you. Something's crazy in that. That's what I call insanity, Shiloh. And this is what I wanted to point out. And thank you for being tolerant with me. As I sat in that convention Saturday, all I could think of was the man that played a critical role in raising me, the World War II vet, that lied about his age at 16, as so many did, to defend the rights of the American people, to defend the Constitution, to defend their liberty. He was 16. He fought in the final war in the South Pacific. He watched his friends disintegrate next to him in the midst of battle, and he very rarely spoke a word of it. He was part of that greatest generation that Tom Brokaw speaks of, and he had the strength and fortitude as a 16-year-old boy to fight for his country. Do we not have the fortitude? Do we not have the strength, the vision, the character to fight for our nation today, to stand up for our children, to do what we know is right? Mind you, if we follow men like President Donald Trump or Governor Ron DeSantis, we'll see that the bulk of the nation, the majority, is behind the people that are bold, the people that demonstrate courage against adversity. We will find that. We're asking you to join us. Friends, we are at war. We're at war with a small group that has misled a minority in our country today. When we come up against transgenders, if as an adult, an 18-year-old wants to make the choice to redirect their life, so be it. I won't stand in their way. But for them to mandate that it is required by the rest of us to expose our children to this, to show it as normal behavior, to run the risk that we speak out as rational human beings in our school board and we're threatened by a Justice Department at a federal level that wants to deem us domestic terrorists, that's where I put my foot down. That's where I say, I've had enough. And I'm asking those of you that feel the same. Stand with us, work with us, support us. We will side by side take this country back and glorify it before the world. Once again, we'll be the beacon of liberty, truth, and justice. I'm Mark Maxon. You've been listening to Revelation Nation.
I'm Shiloh Platts. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you on our next episode of Revelation Nation.